Sin Fronteras Western New York, Buffalo's media platform for Western New York Hispanics,
producing bicultural content that informs, entertains, and inspires the forward thinking.
Sin Fronteras Western New York, delivering bilingual stories,
hot topic conversations,
and the voices from our Latino community.
Sin Fronteras Western New York,
la única producción contemporánea en español
y en inglés en la ciudad de Buffalo. Sin Fronteras Western New York,
your connection to cultural ties in Latin America
and hyperlocal news in the Western New York area.
Sin Fronteras Western New York es para ti.
Another episode of Sin Fronteras Western New York here through WBFO 88.7 HD3. Today we got a special guest, our host, Sheana. How you doing?
Hello, good. How are you, Cass?
Great to be back. Great to be back, and I know our listeners wait for this programming every Saturday, and we're glad to be here with a special guest that's doing monumental things here in the city of Buffalo. And today we have Jeremy Besch from Per Scholas. Per Scholas, you've heard about them, haven't you,
Yes.
Sheana?
Yes, I've heard about Per Scholas before they came to Buffalo, the excitement around it, and I'm very excited to talk to Jeremy today and what he's doing in the workforce development realm. So welcome, Jeremy.
Thanks, Cass. Thanks, Sheana. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, that's great, Jeremy. Even though we're weathering the weather here in Western New York,
Right.
It's always a warm feeling to see what Per Scholas is doing here in Western New York, especially in the city of Buffalo. And that's what we want to talk about today. This is Kaz Rodríguez here in Sin Fronteras with our co-host here, Sheana VanDyne. And we hope to have a great program today. Jeremy, tell me who's Jeremy Besch.
So I am born and raised in Buffalo. I grew up in the University Heights neighborhood, right next to UB South campus. And never thought that I'd be doing work like this. My dad and my uncle ran a blasting contracting business when I was a kid that had been in our family for several generations. My mom had graduated from nursing school when I graduated from 8th grade. I thought that I was going to work in publishing. So I'd gotten an English degree from Canisius College, worked as a line editor reading manuscripts for about a year and really didn't like it. So some friends of mine were teaching at an all-boys Catholic prep school, very similar to St. Joe's Collegiate here, which is where I went to high school. And they had a sudden emergency opening for an English teacher after a school year had started in 1998. So I was looking for work. My soon-to-be fiance had just finished grad school and she was looking for work, and we figured we could do job searches from Detroit just as easily as we could from Buffalo. So I took a job as an English teacher and a running coach for what I thought was going to be a year. And that kicked off a more than 2-decade-long career working in education.
Wow.
So the bulk of that, along with teaching English, I ended up as a school administrator. A lot of my work was focused on student life management, helping kids and their families just connect better to our school. I was at Park School in Snyder for 17 years and ended up as head of school there for my last 2. And it just really connected me to Buffalo and its community. When I was a kid, I didn't realize it, but University Heights was just a wonderful diverse mix of people from all over the world because it sat right next to UB. And then as I got older, my sort of lived experience became less and less diverse. And it wasn't until I became a teacher and became responsible for helping kids manage their lives and be successful that I recognized that I've sort of lost that part of my life as I've gotten older. And I learned for the first time really how valuable it was. I figured I started doing diversity training because I figured, well, this is going to make my job easier. Right. I didn't understand that it had really great value in terms of connecting to other human beings and making both my work and my personal life just deeper and more meaningful. So I worked in schools for 23 years. And in 2021, I launched a consulting company, helping local nonprofits, some schools, human service organizations, with strategy work, some of it around DEI initiatives, some of it around strategic growth, program assessment and design, some professional development stuff. And it was while I was doing that work that I heard about Per Scholas coming to Buffalo. I'm friends with Stephen Tucker, who is the executive director over at Northland Workforce Training Center. And I've been doing some work for him, some program design stuff and some facilitation with their board. And he let me know that, this IT workforce development company was looking to open a campus here in Buffalo. And I was enjoying the consulting life. I was taking care of my dad, who was suffering from Alzheimer's at the time. I was able to ride my bike and bike commute all over the city for my clients. Really liked the pace. So at first I said that I would help Per Scholas find a managing director because that was one of the jobs I was doing. And it took me about 2 or 3 days of just doing my homework on the organization for me to call their recruiter back and say, I think maybe I want this job.
It's a good fit.
And he laughed and he said, that's what Stephen said you would say. So it was just a great fit. Per Scholas does the work that I care most about in the communities that I try most to help. And it has been doing it for 30 years. This is our 30th year.
Wow.
We're in 24 cities across, we have 24 campuses across 18 cities nationwide. And our efficacy numbers in terms of training success, in terms of jobs placement, in terms of whole person support are just off the charts good. So as I was researching them to try and figure out who I was going to invite to apply for this role, it sounded so good that I signed up myself, and here we are.
It's down your alley,
That's
your
right.
professional alley, and now you're back into the educational piece and preparing our future leaders of tomorrow and responding to the job demand here in Western New York. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. We know that we're in a neat spot here because we know that we are on sort of the precipice of thousands of jobs that are going to be attached to the tech sector, either tech-specific jobs or tech-adjacent jobs. A lot of that is attached to New York State's sort of tech corridor initiative that starts in Syracuse and works its way west out towards us. But one of the advantages we have here in Buffalo is we don't exactly know yet what those specific jobs are going to be. And that's an opportunity because Per Scholas is in the business of training up tech generalists. And then we stick with our graduates for an additional 2 years when they're done with us. And over those 2 years, we offer them additional no-cost upskilling opportunities along more than a dozen different career pathways. So it could be cybersecurity, it could be software development, it could be AI. And ideally, we're sort of opening those upskilling opportunities in collaboration with the employers that our graduates have just landed with. So they get their foot in the door in terms of this new career opportunity that they otherwise wouldn't have had an opportunity to explore. And they get additional support from us in terms of turning that first job into a second and a third and a fourth and an actual sustainable career. And that's the model we followed nationwide for a long time. And it works really well. It gives community members a chance to lift themselves and their communities up on their own. It's not a sort of one and done quick fix. It's the first step in a long process that allows communities to strengthen themselves from within. And I love that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Being in a workforce development background myself, I find that, especially in tech, there's a lot of barriers that individuals, especially if they I call them untapped talent. They come from, certain backgrounds that maybe higher education or a bachelor's degree just wasn't in their hindsight, and they can for sure get a certificate in order to supplement for that education and really drill down their skill level. How do you help the student break through those barriers?
Yeah, Sheana, you're totally right. So the communities we serve, and we're open to anybody, but we want folks who are 18 or older, who have a high school degree or equivalent, and have the ability to work right away upon completing our program.
Okay, great.
So this is an intensive boot camp style program, 13 weeks, 9 to 4 every day.
Wow.
It's a commitment on the part of the learners that we bring into the program. Because we recognize how big a lift that is, we do a lot of sort of wraparound services for the individuals who end up with us.
Okay.
And that could address anything. Like you said, there are just a lot of people who can't access these career pathways because their lives haven't allowed them to yet, for whatever reason. And that could be an 18-year-old who's fresh out of high school, who just doesn't know what he or she wants to do yet. It could also be a mid-career 30, 40-year-old who started along one pathway and wasn't happy or lost that job and is now looking for something new to do. And it could also be that person who just, for whatever reason, right, for whatever life circumstances, never really got the start they wanted to in any particular direction. And now they're recognizing tech as a potential career pathway that's sustainable and that will support them over the long term. So the barriers that come with that kind of diversity of background are pretty broad. So it could be things like access to transportation. It could be, how do I commit to a 13-week program if that means I'm going to have to give up my part-time job, and how am I going to pay my bills or rent?
Yeah.
It could be, I've got a couple of kids I got to take care of. All sorts of different things. So what Per Scholas does is it tries to connect itself as quickly as possible to all of the community-based organizations in any city we land in, with the idea that if I have a learner who has this need, who lives in this neighborhood, we're going to know 2 or 3 community-based organizations in that neighborhood that should be able to help them with that need. And then we also provide our own internal supports around things like counseling or access to counseling, financial consulting, right? Helping them figure out financial pathways to make this sustainable. We have a no interest 3-month loan of $3,000 that our learners can access, which doesn't require repayment until they're employed at a certain economic threshold. And if they still have a balance after a certain amount of time, it's forgiven. And one of the things that made Per Scholas so attractive to me as they were coming to Buffalo is this is truly a program that we can drop into place and have immediate positive impact with, right? We don't need to build it out. We don't need to test it for efficacy. It's got a long history of working really well in communities just like Buffalo.
Proven track record.
Right. Yeah. So, I'm approaching the middle of my life. I'm in the middle of my career. The idea of a startup in this capacity was just something that was too big for me to handle anymore. But being able to take a leadership role in a model that I know works, that could have immediate impact and bring real change to Buffalo really quickly, that was just too good to pass up.
And those are the types of programs that Western New York needs. Those programs that are not too bureaucratic,
Mm.
okay, and it's quick to market,
Yeah.
Yeah.
fast to market, if you will. But Jeremy, how long has Per Scholas been in Buffalo?
So I started with Per Scholas just about a year ago, mid-March of 2024. I was working by myself until mid-September when I hired our first teammate, our instructor. Shortly thereafter, we hired an instructor's assistant, and then we hired our talent solutions director, the person who manages all of the relationships we build with our employer partners.
So you're coming up to your first anniversary.
Yeah,
Yeah.
almost a year.
Congratulations.
Yeah. And it's, we've been able to do it because Per Scholas, as a national organization, did a great job with the runway work, right? They talked to the right people in Buffalo for a long time. I was able to sort of take my own personal network that I built up over 20 years as working as an educator, plug that into the network that they'd started building. And it made for a pretty seamless transition. And because I was sort of, once they hired me, we had to wait for New York State approval to be a school. We had to wait for our site to be ready for us. The folks at Larkin Development, Howard Zemsky and his family, have just been champions of ours. Our friends at Empire State Development, who helped to organize the funding that made our launch possible, just also incredible champions. And we have a number of employer partners who have supported us either financially or through hiring our graduates or through just being willing to stand with us as we introduce ourselves to the community, which has made all of this quite a bit easier, right? Like, if you've grown up in and around Buffalo, you know that we are sometimes slow to trust newcomers, in part because we've been burned so many times before, right? So when I became the managing director, I knew that for this to work, we had to establish that trust from the community really quickly, and show that, we're not just talking the talk, we're actually going to walk the walk and do the things that we said we were going to do. Having our employer partners, our funders in place, everybody who's helped us have this conversation, being able to do it from here in Larkinville, which is just this beautiful, re-emerging center of commerce, is just, everything worked out well. It felt like all the stars were aligning, and it made this opportunity just really exciting.
Yeah, sounds like it. And you mentioned something that's very important, and I know a lot of workforce development, pathways or nonprofits struggle with is making those employer partners. And it sounds like your history with valuing diversity, always being in that state of mind. What was your, I guess, come to the table with the value proposition of employer partners to tell them, like, this is going to work. This is why you should hire these people. Because I feel like at times there's a disconnect. What do you think?
Yeah, for sure. For years, since 2004 or so, I've been in the community talking about white allyship, talking about, how people could use their leverage, their privileges, their strengths, to help lift up other people around them who might not have access to those same things yet, right? So that conversation's been a common thread through all of it. But really, you can strip all of that away, and what Per Scholas is doing, or any workforce development agency really, is economic development, right? So there's a bottom line argument to be made here.
Exactly.
And the reality is that a lot of our historical hiring practices, and maybe less so around tech, because tech tends to be an industry that's a little bit ahead of the curve on some things, but really across the board, we've put historical barriers to easy hiring in place that oftentimes are not necessary. So, for example, the idea that to do an entry-level tech job, you need to have 3 to 5 years of experience or a 2 or a 4-year degree.
It's crazy.
It's just not realistic expectations.
Yeah, of anyone, right?
Of anyone, especially when you consider the cost that's often attached to that 2 or 4-year degree and the time it takes to get those 3 to 5 years of experience.
Mm-hmm.
From the employer end, if you stick to those expectations too rigidly, you essentially cut off your own access to an immense, talented workforce that's sitting right here.
Agreed.
So programs like Per Scholas really offer a quick, often more updated, less expensive option for securing really good workers really quickly with 2 years of additional support for upskilling that makes them even better employers in your organization once they land there. And that is really in many ways just a numbers game, right? You take the amount of time it takes to train these folks up, take the quality of the training that they get in the program, and you take the fact that our programs are delivered at no cost. That's far easier and faster than having to wait 3 to 5 years and get through a 2 or 4-year degree program that is most often tied to tuition.
Exactly.
The other part of it is our program is not just technical based. So we'll spend about 80% of the time in a 13-week IT support program on the hard skills. And we work with CompTIA A+ certification, which is updated on an annual basis. So we know that the training they're getting is top-notch, industry standard. This is the foot in the door for a starting job in tech. The other 20% of the time, though, we spend on very intentional work around professional development, right? How do we ensure that our learners, some of whom have never had a professional career, understand basic things like how do I build a good resume or a LinkedIn page? How do I do well in a job interview? All the way up to how am I a good teammate and coworker? How do I manage a conflict with a coworker in a way that makes sense in a workspace?
Gotcha.
Right? So our graduates are not only really talented, technically trained people, they're also really good coworkers, right? Our mantra on our campus, and we try to model this within our own team for our learners, is like, look, the most important thing that you can be is an easy colleague, right? Someone who's reliable, does their job well, and who's flexible enough to help other colleagues when they need help. If you can check that box off first, I don't care what your technical or expertise area is, you're going to be of value to your organization. And because we tie those two things so closely together, the technical skills, but also the professional development aspect, we know that we're putting really good workers out into that workforce, and that helps us build that trust I was talking about with both the community members and the employers.
That's great. We're speaking with Jeremy Besch, the director of Per Scholas, a workforce development initiative, a program that's making a difference here in Western New York, specifically in the Buffalo, New York area. They're located in Larkinville. And Jeremy, how can folks get a hold of Per Scholas? How can they find out more information about Per Scholas?
So the easiest way is just to go to our national website, which is just www.perscholas.org. And then from that website, you can access the Buffalo page, which has all of our contact information. It has information about the IT support class that we offer, and it has information about the much broader menu of coursework that Per Scholas learners can do throughout the national organization.
Okay.
So we're new, and right now we're offering one class through one classroom in person in Larkinville. But our plans are to expand that footprint pretty aggressively over the next 5 years, to have satellite locations throughout the city, to expand into Niagara Falls, out east toward Rochester into the South towns. We really want to sort of cover all of Western New York with a Per Scholas net that allows people from any community, no matter where you live, to access our training programs. We also offer a ton of remote training program opportunities that folks in Buffalo could do right now, even if we're not offering them from this campus in Larkinville. And that's where the value of the national website is just so important. You know, if you do already have a background in tech and you're looking for some upskilling, that website's a good place to look in terms of, well, what other things might be available. And then for what is becoming a growing number of our own local graduates, that same career pathway accelerator is available to them as well, so that they can start with job one, but work their way all the way up into that career pathway.
Phenomenal. You mentioned about the class and the programs. How many cohorts have you already trained, and how many are already working? You're coming up to your first year anniversary.
Yep. So I started in March. We didn't launch our first cohort because there was still a lot of runway work to do until October 15th.
Okay.
So that cohort just graduated a couple of Fridays ago on January 24th.
Awesome.
It's our classroom is 22 seats. So for that cohort, we ended up with 20 graduates, 5 of whom had already secured jobs before we graduated.
Wow.
So we actually had to do some work around with our employer partners around, okay, like this is wonderful, but how can we do both? You know, how can we complete the program and start this workforce?
Secure the employment, right?
Since then, we've had a couple of other folks get jobs. Tech Buffalo has been a great sort of convening partner for us. They just ran a job fair at Northland Workforce Training Center a couple of days ago that I think will also result in a couple of jobs for our graduates. Per Scholas nationally typically tracks jobs placement on a yearly calendar. So if that last cohort graduated on January 24th, we would do the tally on January 24th of next year. We're already approaching 50% jobs placement, which is just fantastic.
Congratulations.
Our goal is to be at 80% after one calendar year. So we recognize that Buffalo is ready for us. We recognize that there's a ton of community need and interest for that first cohort. We had over 400 applicants for those first 22 seats.
Here in Buffalo, New York.
Here in Buffalo, New York. Yep.
And in your first cohort was a total of 22, you said?
22, yeah.
So your waiting list is
Your
long.
waiting list, huh?
The waiting list is long. And it's also allowed us to partner with other organizations like Goodwill and their Good Skills program, or the folks over at Mission Ignite, who do less intensive more introductory level tech training, so that we can use them as an on-ramp to us, and then we can be the on-ramp to the employers. And then organizations like Tech Buffalo help us collaborate with, Spectrum or Odoo or M&T, our banking partners, Ingram Micro, a broad number of local employers. And what we're really trying to do, I've worked with Sheana and the organization Corp that she works with. We're trying to collaboratively make it clear to everybody that here are the pathways for you that are non-traditional, that will give you access to these sustainable careers, and make sure everybody's on the same page, from community member to training organization to convener to employer. Because the sooner we do that, the healthier we will become as one large community.
It's great.
Right.
So true.
And that's the end goal, is like, how can we do this quickly? How can we do it in a sustainable way? And how can we make sure that all of these jobs that are right on our doorstep are going to people who live in our neighborhoods, who support our city, and who are interested in staying here for their lives with their families. I think if we figure that out, then, then we're doing something major.
Phenomenal story. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
and I was gonna say that, in this past year since, Per Scholas has been, working with us and just this I don't know, enterprise of workforce development, we have broken down those silos, and I will genuinely say we really have been working together. And
Yeah.
I feel as though, like you said, there's more than enough participants that really they're eager to learn. They need those sustainable wages, and maybe they'll go to Corp and get a Salesforce cert, and then they'll go to Per Scholas and get a CompTIA. Like, how fruitful does their resume look? And then the transferable skills that you're able to give them.
Right.
It's just it's a win-win. So I'm so glad that we found, leaders that are like-minded that really just want the community to win. So it's awesome to see.
Jeremy, you mentioned community partners, and that's so important because these community partners, these community-based organizations, have a direct link to their communities, their neighborhoods. Right now we're in the midst of building the Hispanic Heritage Cultural Institute, where we will have learning labs, we will have a workforce development component, and I just can't wait to see Per Scholas be part of our community, training our folks and getting them prepared for the job demand here in Western New York. So it's just great. Great story. And we're speaking with Jeremy Besch, from Director of Per Scholas here on WBFO 88.7 HD3, with our co-hosts here, Sheana VanDyne and Kaz Rodríguez, and the wonderful things that's happening here in Western New York to prepare our future workforce for the job demand.
Yeah, and speaking of the Hispanic Heritage Institute, I'm not sure too much of Per Scholas' history with the, Hispanic people or the culture, the community. Are they open to having classes that are in Spanish, or is that something that's available now?
So it's not available now, but it is something that we've been talking about. So Per Scholas was founded in the South Bronx.
Okay.
Okay.
So you're familiar. You're familiar.
There's the bottles there.
There is a direct connection.
Okay.
And my colleague, so the person who does my role in New York City is named Debbie Roman, and she and I have had a chance to connect quite a bit.
She been to Buffalo?
She has not yet, but I'm working on it.
Yeah. Cass would
Welcome.
be happy to co-host, I'm sure.
We have active conversations a lot. And Per Scholas started pretty small. I mean, we were founded in 1995. And actually, we were founded as a program very much like Mission Ignite here in Buffalo, which used to be called Computers for Children.
Mm-hmm.
And our original mission was we would take discarded tech, recycle it, and try to get it into the hands of community members who couldn't afford new tech on their own.
Oh, wow.
But Per Scholas saw that over their first 3 years of existence, the people that they were training to repair the tech kept getting poached by other companies. So a light bulb went off and they said, okay, maybe we should be a training organization.
Yeah.
And that's really where we came to life. And then, slow growth over 30 years. But then COVID happened. And COVID really demonstrated that there is just an incredible need for training organizations in the tech industry.
Oh, for sure.
And that was an opportunity for Per Scholas to really expand its footprint. So as we're doing that, we're having constant conversations over not just the technical aspect of things, right? Because we know we have to constantly update our curricula, we have to constantly update our teaching approach so that we can stay current and so that our graduates are really high quality employees. But also in terms of how do we connect to this particular community, right? We see that this community over here has a need. How do we connect to this one? So it's as we build out our strategic plan, and we're just about to publicly launch a strategic plan that will cover up through the next 5 years. Those are the things we're thinking about. And, right now, all of our courses are delivered in English, but we're recognizing that if there's a way that we can expand that, then we connect that many more people to these pathways. And one of the conversations, which is exciting, is that in the past, if we talk to employers about the prospect of hiring from a workforce beyond an English-speaking workforce, it was often a conversation stopper, right? That's not necessarily true anymore.
Okay.
Which is a good sign, I think. You know, we're seeing more corporate partners who are willing to consider workforces who are adept in multilingual capability. So that's a really great example, Sheana, of one of the spots where our age and sort of recognition across the country as a tech trainer helps us drive these conversations with employer partners as equal partners in figuring out, okay, how do we actually connect more quickly and more effectively to broader workforces? Because everybody's seeing the same issue of not having quick enough, affordable enough access to workforces at their doorstep.
That's
Awesome.
great. That's great. And, you know, for the Institute, the Cultural Institute, you know, our plans is to have Spanish and English classes
Okay.
for those that are not dominant either or, and to be able to open those doors of opportunities. So I see a lot of synergy here in the years to come with Per Scholas. Per Scholas has like a Spanish spin to that name.
Latin.
Latin spin to that name.
Yeah.
What does it mean?
So it's not actually a tech name at all. It's essentially about education, scholarliness, knowledge, right? You know, being attached to a way of thinking that maybe you weren't attached to before, right? I'm not sure of the origin story behind the name, but you know, I do know that part of what we do is we let our community members know that, you know, this pathway is for you. You are qualified to do this. You do belong in these spaces. And for a lot of them, that is a new way of thinking, right? So bringing them closer to this new sort of scholarly approach that they hadn't considered before is one of the most fun things about this program. And I'll give you an example. From that first cohort that we graduated, every time we graduate a class, the learners, the cohort members themselves, vote for a class member who embodies the values of the organization.
Yeah,
right? It's
like a
called our-
class president.
Yeah. You know, the award is called our Core Values Award. And sometimes it's broken up into sort of individual values like resilience.
Yeah.
But in this case, they voted for someone who represented all of them, right? And Taranja is her name. She and I had an exchange about the second week into her cohort where she was not sure she could do this, right? And part of it was in jest, you know, like, I quit, I can't do this anymore. But it was enough for me to pull her aside and say, hey, yes, you can. Like, there were 400 plus applicants for this program, and you're sitting here, right?
Wow.
So, like, is it hard work? It sure is. This is a challenging program. We ask a lot of our learners. It's a big commitment. But once they're here, my favorite part of the work so far is watching them get to that point where they go from sort of nervous and unsure about whether this is actually doable to confident about, you bet it's doable. And now I'm going to go get this job. It's been really neat. And Taranja was one of those 5 who had secured employment before she even graduated.
Wow.
Well,
Look at that.
what a great story, Sheana. The director of a program, these personal connections with the students to help the student not only while they're in the program, but continue the mentoring and the coaching once they leave the program, go to into the workforce and continue their career.
That's amazing. And like walk us through. So let's say I see a Per Scholas ad and I fill out the form and I want to be a participant. So I put my name in, and then what happens from there?
So right now, you would get contacted by one of our national team members around recruitment and admissions.
Okay.
And they would start off with an interview, get to know you, who you are, what your background is a little bit. Talk about things like, what kind of tech experience do you have? What kind of tech help might you need if you're going to join our program? And there's pre-work to do. So once you're accepted, you're given some assignments to do so you don't come into the program completely cold.
Oh, okay.
But that'll shift a little bit because we've gotten big enough now. We've been successful enough. I'm actually hiring 2 team members as we speak.
Staff.
Yep. And one of them is a local recruitment and admissions person.
Nice.
Per Scholas has been an excellent company in terms of providing us with all of the support we need to have a successful launch here. But there are some things where it's just better to have local feet on the ground.
Oh, for sure.
Right.
Especially in Buffalo. We're a very unique city.
Yes, right. And it is. So like Per Scholas lives in a lot of really big places, right?
Yeah.
Atlanta, LA, Chicago, New York City, right? Buffalo's built a little differently, and that local contact has incredible value here.
The culture
Right.
is different.
Right? If I want to talk to Kaz, right, I can call a friend who knows Kaz, and we can have a conversation probably in a couple hours.
Yes, that's so true.
That's a little bit of a closer, faster, more familiar network than some of our campuses have in bigger places where you have to go through sort of more formal channels. But that admissions process will now start to be informed by that, because by the time we start recruiting for the next cohort, which will launch in June, we'll have our own local person doing that work.
Great.
So instead of just getting an email or a phone call from, the person you've contacted through our website, you'll actually get a phone call from the person who's in an office here, and we'll have you down here to see the site, to have the conversation, to meet you in person, to make sure that what you're signing up for is something that you're interested in following through on, and that, you're a good candidate for the program.
Yeah, add that personal touch. And you're right, it's very much needed. And that's great that you're not only creating jobs, obviously, through your job training, but also, through Per Scholas.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. One of our staff people, the instructor's assistant, and this is part of what I love about being in this role for this company now. I was volunteering at a local event for another workforce development organization as a guest mock interviewer, knowing that I was about to be hiring in a couple of weeks for this particular role. And I met someone who'd gone through one of our peer programs, who had the technical skills to do it, and who just knocked my socks off in the interview. She was awesome, personable, on top of things, easy connector with other people. So I was able to say to her, hey, I think I'm going to be hiring for a role that might be perfect for what you're looking for in a couple of weeks. Are you interested in my sharing the job opening? And she was, and now she's here.
Wow. And that's Danielle?
Yeah.
Yeah, she's fantastic.
Yeah.
She's fantastic.
And she's great. And, we're talking about a career pathway within Per Scholas for Danielle, right?
Wow.
And we're doing the same thing with Syed, who's our lead instructor, right? It's just, there were so many things about Per Scholas that made it so appealing to me as, someone who's sort of entering the second half of my working career and is really just interested in what can I be doing to make Buffalo a better place.
That's great.
Right. And they've been just excellent partners in that work.
Jeremy, you mentioned job placements. What are some of those companies? Can you name a few?
Yeah. We've placed our graduates with Spectrum, with Odoo, with Tesla, with Northwest Bank, And we have candidates deep in interviews with M&T, KeyBank, Ingram Micro. Gosh, you're putting me on the spot here, Kaz. I don't want to forget anybody.
It's okay. You Kaleida,
Vera. Like, if you think about banking, if you think about health insurance or medical, if you think about legal, aside from all of the really tech specific, like, there isn't a job or a position anymore that isn't in some way tech adjacent.
For
right?
sure.
So the nice thing about our graduates, and some of this is attached to that professional development focus, is they're really good at just about anything. And if that anything is also attached to a beneficial aspect of having some tech know-how, even better, right? So our focus is always going to be tech industry first, because that's sort of what we're most interested in. But if you're a local employer and you're looking for a really good employee who's also able to help with any of the tech needs that you have around your office, we're a good place to start.
That's great. And for those employers that are listening, how can they contact?
So they can go, same thing. All of my contact is right on the website. And it's just, we're a phone call away. So
Great.
There's an office phone, but that links directly to my phone number or to my director of talent solutions, whose name is Colleen Reedy. Colleen is also a well-known entity across the board.
Everyone knows Colleen.
So the two of us together are constantly engaging in conversations with local employers around, hey, do you know who we are? Do you know what we do? Do you know how good our graduates are? Because they can help, and together we can all start lifting up the community.
You mentioned you're on your second cohort of students.
Yeah.
When are they expected to graduate?
So their last day of classes is May 9th, and we'll either do the graduation that day or early that next week. So one of the lessons we learned with this last go around is that they might have jobs to get to. So we're in the process of figuring out what makes the most sense. Per Scholas is great, and we do have some policies around, like, hey, if one of our learners gets a job that they just can't say no to, like, we can figure out ways to accommodate finishing up the coursework. It's just a little cleaner and easier for everybody if we can, like, do that first and then do, but it's never a barrier. We try to be as flexible and as agile as we can with that stuff.
I know.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say we missed the graduation, but
you gotta invite us to the next one.
You should have seen the pictures. It looked really fancy. I would be like, and it's so important, like those little nuances of making someone feel like you did it, you accomplished this.
Yeah.
Like I was like, I was really, really happy for them. I was like, oh, this looks like better than my high school graduation.
Yeah, it was cool because, like, the learners, the 400 plus applicants, right? Something that felt great for us, but that you can't actually visually see, right?
Mm-hmm.
Earlier this summer, Sheana, you came by when we did a breakfast for our community-based org partners, and we weren't sure how many people were going to show up, but there was like 50 people there from all these different local organizations. It was a beautiful early summer day. Just really nice. That graduation ceremony, I had to actually book a second bigger venue, and Seneca One hosted us, and they were wonderful. Because we realized so quickly that the numbers we had originally planned for were just way too small. We had probably 130, 140 people show up.
Wow. From
funding organizations, like the Buffalo Bills and the NFL Foundation showed up. Folks from Amazon showed up, and it was a terrible weather day, right? It was hard to get to Buffalo that day. We were competing against a Bills pep rally in front of City Hall. But we had that many people show up, and for my learners to be able to see that, we had them sitting in the front row, but they can turn around and see an entirely filled auditorium behind them, celebrating what they've done. Boy, you talk about a nice moment. Our local elected officials were there, representatives from Majority Leader Crystal Stokes' office. April Baskin's representative was there. The mayor sent certificates. It was just a really phenomenal day, and really indicative of how nicely Buffalo has embraced us so far.
That's great.
And it makes it feel even better to know that we're giving back in a really significant and quickly mobilizing way.
That's great. And rest assured, Jeremy and your staff, that, you have a partner here in the Hispanic community. So we just can't wait for the Institute to be up and running, because we have a place for Per Scholas.
I love it. We should be talking about a satellite location.
Well, we will.
He's already thinking about it,
We will.
Jeremy.
This is long term and forward thinking. But Jeremy, and we're speaking with Jeremy Besch from Per Scholas, the director of the Workforce Development Program here, right out of Larkinville, but soon to be in your community. And Jeremy, for anyone listening who may be interested in Per Scholas but is unsure if the tech is right fit for them, what advice would you give them?
I'd say look us up, give us a call, have a conversation, right? We can talk you through all of the aspects of what it looks like to do our work. I mean, I would remind people that, you're listening right now to an English teacher who's now running a workforce development company in tech.
Right.
Right. The pathways are possible and they're right in front of us. And sometimes we just have to be able and willing to see them and start walking down them. So I'd say give us a call, have a conversation, and we can talk about what all of this looks like. You do not need to have a background in tech. It helps. I mean, it makes some of the things earlier. But one of the things about the tech industry is that it is constantly evolving, right? So even someone who does have a degree in tech, maybe from 20 years ago, still needs to do new training.
Yep.
So if you're new to it, you are not alone.
Sharpen
because
us
everybody in the room needs that new training. And another thing we haven't really talked about, which I should mention, is that all of our training is done through a cohort-based experiential model. So you are working with the other people in the room, with a talented instructional team, and you are learning by doing every day.
Hands-on.
Hands-on. So every learner in our program gets what we call a break and fix computer that is completely functional on day one. And then we have them break it and they learn their skills by fixing it, right? The same thing with network setups, so that you can walk into any company who has any sort of IT network need, and you might know the exact answer to the problem that pops up in front of you, but you're going to know 6 ways to figure it out. And that's really the story of working in tech, right? You can't know everything.
No.
But you can know how to start walking down the right pathway to a solution.
Yeah, be a problem solver.
Yeah. You're a problem solver,
That's
you're
amazing.
a critical thinker, or you're a teammate, right? If you're up for those types of things, then you are qualified to be in our program.
Is there an age limit?
You got to be 18. There is no age limit on the other.
Yes, you're gonna sign up.
Oh my God. Exciting. How can the broader Buffalo community and the local organizations support the mission of Per Scholas?
The first thing is helping us tell our story.
Okay.
Right. And that's, spreading the word. If you have someone who is at a transitional point in their career, whether they're new to the workforce, whether they've been in it for a while and they're looking for something new, or whether they've just never found that sort of start point that they want, recommend us to them. And then if you're attached to one of our local organizations, I mean, so many people around Western New York work for Blue Cross or Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. They'll work for M&T. They'll work for any number of the big key bank, Univera, any number of the big organizations I'm talking about. As you all start thinking about hiring, start thinking about us. We are a new resource. who is going to be graduating out more and more new graduates into an employee pool that's never been here before. So, help us sing that song. That is the best thing that anybody can do for us right now. And if you are one of those hiring managers who happens to be listening to this program, hire my people.
That's great.
Because the sooner we can prove efficacy, the sooner we can show that we're walking the walk, the easier it will be for us to expand, grow, and have greater impact in our community.
And that's exactly what we're trying to do here with Sin Fronteras, Western New York,
Yes.
WBFO 88.7 FM HD3, a program that comes to you every Saturday at 10 a.m. and it's rebroadcast throughout the week. So to all our listeners, we're here speaking with Jeremy Besch, Director of Per Scholas, a workforce development program initiative that just landed 1 year ago. It's going to be a 1-year anniversary here in Western New York and Buffalo, New York. And Jeremy, we like to extend our thanks and appreciation for you
Yes.
taking your time today, right on site. And I see the students walking back and forth.
Yeah, the building is beautiful. Everyone should come and visit, do a
Absolutely.
tour, the colors. I love blue. It's my favorite. So
That's great.
love the aesthetics.
I would like to thank you for this opportunity and sharing your story, which is our story and the community story to uplift Western New York. So thank you to all our listeners. Jeremy, thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Sheila, thank you guys. This is community work. This is stuff we do together. So I'm always happy to talk about it, and I'm always happy to have wonderful partners like you guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Well, this is Sheana VanDyne and
Kaz Rodríguez.
with Sin Fronteras. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
What a great program.
Yes,
Thank you.
amazing.